Welcome, everybody, to the Heal Your Hunger Show. So happy to have you here. It is a great day to be alive, and I'm excited about today's message because it's so vital if you're somebody who wants to heal from emotional eating and binge eating. I'm going to give you a very easy measuring stick for what foods you should eat and what foods you shouldn't eat, which ones to stay away from and which ones are safe. And I'm excited about this message because it's the same measuring stick I use as well. And before I get into that, I just want to say welcome if you're here for the first time. This is where we talk about things that are a little bit more advanced to the conversation of what to eat and what not to eat. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about that, but in a much different way than you're used to hearing about it. So I've just come back from the Netherlands. I was there with my partner. We visited his 91-year-old mother. We also visited family and friends, and it's a lovely experience. I get to go there a couple times a year, and I love it. I absolutely love it. And before we went there, we stopped at my high school reunion. I went to prep school in the Northeast in Concord, Massachusetts, and boarding school. And some of the stereotypes are true and some are not. In fact, my partner's like, why would I want to go to a boarding school reunion? That sounds horrible. But he had fun, and so I'm glad he was open-minded. And it's just really nice to connect with people who aren't necessarily good friends, but when you spend 4 years together in an environment where you live there, and we went to school 6 days a week. We literally had school on Saturdays for half a day, and then we did sports, and then we did all kinds of extracurricular things. That was my big thing. I love to be in theater and art and all that. I was president of my school. So when you're together with this small class of people, we were about 65 people, it's an intense experience, not to mention the academics were intense as well. It's a prep school, prepping for college, and it was harder in some ways than my college that I went to. So it was intense and really fun. I'm so glad I went. It was my 40th, and I look forward to going back. I hadn't been for a while, so that was a good experience. Okay, so on my website, there's a quiz which will tell you if you're an emotional eater or a food addict or somewhere in between. And this quiz helps you determine where you are on a spectrum of emotional eating. And the reason why this is so important is because not everybody's on the same place of that spectrum. We're all different in our experiences with food and with weight, with binging, with binge eating, with food addiction, with restriction. We're somewhere on that spectrum, but where is determined by two things. When you take the quiz on my website, it will help you determine where you are. But what it's determining when you get your personalized score are primarily two things. One is the level of control that you have when you eat, and the other are the number of consequences. So control and consequences are what I want to talk about today. And this is a way for you to start determining what foods are okay, in air quotes, and what foods aren't for you to eat. I can't tell you that. And I don't think anybody's really qualified to tell you that. Sure, there's good health advice out there. There's many books on nutrition. There's many books on hacking your health and your brain and your body. But what they're not taking into account is you and what you need in order to feel in control around food and in order to not have negative consequences. So control and consequences are what I want to talk about. And this is the measuring stick I use for myself to determine what foods I can and can't eat. When you're an emotional eater or a food addict, it's not the same as any other addictive habit. Like, you can put the plug in the jug when you're an alcoholic, right? You stop drinking. That's it. It's black and white. Case closed. Do not drink alcohol. But you can't say do not eat food, right? We have to eat. So to me, it's the hardest of all addictive habits. Honestly, the hardest of all addictive habits, because you have to eat. And so you have to walk that very fine line between eating for health and eating for other reasons, like emotional reasons, and then going overboard and then slipping into a binge and then feeling terrible. So walking that fine line is very difficult. And if you think you can do this alone, good luck with that. Not easy to do. That's why I needed support to overcome emotional eating. And that's why I offer support to others, because doing this alone, walking that very fine line, with the hardest of all addictive habits, that is not easy. And it's best to get support. So I want to teach you about control and consequences and why these are the two main things to pay attention to. When I say control, I'm talking about eating things where you don't feel out of control, eating things that you can eat and leave behind. Okay, instead of falling down the rabbit hole of binge eating. Now, I was a sugar and carb addict, meaning I couldn't handle my sugar. If you gave me something sweet, something ooey gooey and chewy, I would eat all that was available. It just grabbed a hold of me and I wanted more. And it didn't have to be ooey gooey and chewy. Things like cereal or muffins or potato chips, salty and carby and greasy. These are the things I binged on. These are the things most emotional eaters binge on. We rarely binge on steak. Sure, I can eat too much steak, but it doesn't have the physiological effect that sugar and carbs do. Carbs, by the way, like bread and pasta, muffins, chips, they all metabolize as sugar in your body, which is why there's a physiological aspect to it as well. You're physically addicted as well as perhaps emotionally addicted. And I was both most of the time, but those are the foods I gravitated towards because of the physical addiction. Also the comfort, right? They gave me a little serotonin hit. I felt better immediately, calmer. But also emotionally, they covered up my emotions. I didn't feel any pain after a bag of chips. Like I didn't feel anything except maybe stuffed. So what foods cause you to feel out of control? This is the first of the two main measuring sticks by which you can determine what to eat or what foods are best for you. If you feel in control around foods like meat, okay, if meat doesn't make you feel out of control, meat's probably not going to be a trigger food for you. However, if you open up a bag of chips and you can't stop until that bag is done, that might be a trigger food for you. Anything snacky for an emotional eater, anything you stick your hand into and grab some out of, think about it. Cereal, chips, Hershey's Kisses, candies. These are not safe foods for me. Can I eat them in a controlled way? Usually not. When it's snacky, I want more. What foods do you typically go overboard on when you don't intend to? What foods do you tell yourself, I'm going to have just one, or I'm going to just have one serving? And then you find yourself going back for more. What foods are those? Now, just knowing what those foods are doesn't mean you're not going to be able to eat them. You likely need a program to help you diminish your sense of addiction to these foods, because it's not just physical, it's also emotional. But first you got to get honest about what those foods are. And I tell this to my clients all the time, like, what are your trigger foods? Really important to know what makes you feel out of control. And you may be able to control yourself around them, but if you find yourself thinking about them constantly, okay, even though by hook or by crook, you're like, I'm not having any more, I'm having one serving, that's it. This is not a trigger food. It's not a trigger food. If you find that you think about that food over and over, or that food is the thing you want to eat next, or at the next meal, or you're scheming for how you're going to get more if you run out, the mental obsession is part of being out of control with that food. And not just the eating of it, but also the thinking about it, the obsession. The obsession is part of what makes us feel out of control. And I don't want to be obsessed with anything. If I find that something is owning me, like I'm like, ooh, that was so good, I got to get my hands on more of that. Or I'm going to have that for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's a problem for me. And I have to do this evaluation myself. I have to think honestly about what makes me feel out of control. And if I don't feel in control, it's a trigger food. Now, there are circumstances in which things that aren't necessarily a trigger food for me can still trigger me to overeat. And that's when I have other circumstances, like I'm tired or I'm emotional. Now, foods that could sometimes be absolutely fine and not trigger foods could trigger me to overeat if my emotional and physical state is triggerable. Like when you're tired, it's easier to overeat. Let's face it, it's just easier to overeat. So we have to factor all these things in. I'll give you a real life example. As I said, we just got home from the Netherlands. Now, typically in the morning, I like to have yogurt. Often I eat a cashew yogurt with some protein powder. But when I'm in the Netherlands, like my partner, I just eat the dairy yogurt that they have. In my yogurt, I like to put some chopped up pecans, whereas my partner will have granola. And granola typically has a ton of sugar in it, so I steer clear of it. Granola has been a binge food for me in the past. I mean, I could eat bowl after bowl after bowl of granola and milk. So that is a trigger food. I don't eat granola typically. But here we are overseas, and my partner found a granola that didn't have any sugar in it. And he's like, oh, Trish can have this too. So, of course, I forget that it's my trigger food, one of my trigger foods, and I have some granola in my yogurt. When I was overseas, it wasn't a big deal. It gave me a little crunch. That's really nice. I come home, I'm jet lagged and totally off my game. And we have a little bit left of the granola. I brought it home because I'm like, it's sugar free. So I held on to it. And I'm like, here's granola for the morning. We just got back. And so he uses it for his yogurt. And then there's a little bit left. I use it for my yogurt, but there's still some in the bag. Could have been for the next day, but I start nibbling. Nibbly, snacky foods. No bueno for me. I start nibbling on the granola after I already finished my breakfast. And then it's like, oh, I might as well finish the rest. So I ended up eating more than I wanted to. It wasn't very much. It was maybe a third of a cup. But when you're dealing with granola or nuts or something else like that, it can add up fast. So point is, I was tired. I was in that perfect storm of being jet lagged and tired and just kind of not having my head on right and having a snacky, bingey food. This is my point. There are foods that are just not safe when you get me in the right environment. So the moral of the story is when foods are triggering at times, it's helpful for me to know this about myself and to sidestep those foods and not try to keep eating them, not trying to prove that I can have them. People are always trying to prove they can have cake. You know, I had one slice and I left it alone. That's fine if you can, but be honest. Are you still thinking about it? Do you feel compelled? A compulsion is when you feel compelled, where you have to have more. You have to have more and you can't stop yourself. That compulsion is horrible, for one thing, right? As an emotional eater, it's awful, and normal people don't have this. So don't take advice from normal people who have never experienced the compulsion to eat or don't experience it the way we experience it. You know, if a doctor tells you to eat less and exercise more, run for the hills. That is somebody who doesn't understand the compulsion. Now, where does compulsion come from? My experience, it comes from three places. The first is emotions. When you're an emotional eater, you feel compelled to eat to kill emotions, to just put a blanket over your emotions so you don't feel those emotions anymore. The second cause of compulsion is stress. Stress drives overeating. If you're in a high pressure job, if you're in a family situation where there's a lot of stress, if you're taking care of a parent and it's super taxing, that's going to contribute to the compulsion to overeat. So the three things, again, that cause compulsion are buried emotions, emotions that you want to just run away from, stress, and the third is habit. So as emotional eaters, we have a compulsion to eat in part because that's just what we've done for so long. It's a habit. It's a knee-jerk reaction to stress and emotions. It's a habit. And the way that you stop the compulsion to eat is you address the emotions, you address the stress, and you build new habits. Now, this doesn't happen overnight. This is a process. It's what I teach. It's the Heal Your Hunger way. But these are the things that cause us to feel compelled to eat. So taking a look at foods that are trigger foods, but also other parts of your life, like how much sleep you're getting, how many emotions you're dealing with, whether or not you're pushing yourself to the max. Emotional eaters are great at this. As overeaters, we're overdoers. These are things you have to take into account as well, because they contribute to feeling out of control with food. If you want to lose weight and keep it off, it's not a one-pronged approach. You have to cover many different bases in order to be successful. So I talked about control. Let me now talk about consequences. We have consequences when we overeat, obviously. When we overeat anything, we gain weight, right? We gain weight, we feel sick, we feel disappointed in ourselves. We don't fit into our clothes, we don't want to have sex, we feel lethargic, we don't want to get on a bicycle and ride around the block with our grandkids. There's many consequences to our overeating. There's health problems like diabetes, gut issues, autoimmune issues, heart disease. There's all kinds of things that we experience as consequences to overeating. Even if you're not a binger, if you eat too much at every meal, or you tend to stuff yourself with carbs and sugar and fat, chances are you're living with some of those consequences. So I have to consider, what are the consequences of eating that food? How does that food make me feel? First of all, if it makes me feel out of control, that's a consequence I want to sidestep. Do you feel in control when you're eating that food? And do you have consequences from eating that food that are negative? If they're positive, great. When I eat a salad, I feel great. I don't feel stuffed. I feel like I've eaten the right amount if I don't load it up with croutons and blue cheese dressing like I used to. But if I eat a healthy salad with healthy fats and healthy protein, I feel good. My skin looks good. I'm just beaming. My health is great. My emotional health is great. My physical health is great. But if I eat foods that weigh me down, if I eat foods that cause me to feel bad, like sugar and carbs, my skin doesn't look good, I don't have energy, and I'm also disappointed in myself because I know better. I know those aren't my best choices. So we have to think about the consequences. The reason why I founded Heal Your Hunger, the reason why I get up every day very passionate about helping others heal their relationship with food, is because I know the hell of being a binge eater and being out of control with food. I also know the hell of feeling compelled to eat, even when I didn't want to. I also know the hell of being 50 pounds overweight. So those are consequences I don't want. And our body takes a toll when we are addicted to food year after year, decade after decade. So I have to ask myself, when I'm looking at food, how is it going to make me feel? Am I going to feel good about my food choices, or am I going to feel bad about my food choices? Are the food choices going to affect me negatively or affect me positively? And also, do I feel in control when I eat that food? Like, can I eat it and leave it alone and not think about it? Or is it going to own me, where all of a sudden it's all I'm thinking about? There are some foods I don't feel safe around, and I've accepted that. I feel like I could fall down the rabbit hole very easily, especially if I'm tired and emotional. And those are the foods I have to stay away from. So control and consequences. How's it going to make me feel? Am I going to feel good in my clothes after I eat this? So this isn't the whole picture, okay? There's a lot that we need to do in order to heal our relationship with food. But I just wanted to give you this little measuring stick of asking yourself, do I feel in control around this food? And do I have consequences from eating this food? Because these are two very simple ways of starting to identify where you are on the emotional eating spectrum. And if you want to take the emotional eating quiz and get a personalized score right away regarding that spectrum, go ahead and take the quiz on my website at healyourhunger.com. We got to tune in, friends. We got to get honest. We got to get real. And then we have to take action to have a different experience around food. And most of all, we need support. So don't hesitate to reach out so we can help you heal. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next show. If you're ready to get off the dieting roller coaster ride and finally make peace with food and with your body, talk to a Heal Your Hunger mentor about what steps you need to take based on your own history with food and weight. Go to healyourhunger.com and register for an emotional eating breakthrough session and see how fast you can experience real change. It's a complimentary evaluation, but there are limited spots available. So go to healyourhunger.com and register to speak with a mentor today.